Hello and welcome to Oak Road Hatter. I'm Finley Cannon, and as always, I'm joined by Jamie Castle and Adam Driscoll. And today, we're doing a full squad review. It's that time of the season again where players start to make their way out, and we've got plenty to talk about after, let's face it, a terrible season. But first of all, Jamie, how are you doing?
Yeah, not too bad. A 2 week break that I think is safe to say we all needed after, a pretty devastating end to the season. But no, 2 weeks on, sent off my season ticket renewal form, and we go again.
How are you doing, Adam?
Yeah, good, thank you, mate. I've done the same as Jamie. Sent off my renewal form. I mean, I wouldn't say I'm full of optimism right now, but I'm feeling better than everybody was 2 weeks ago. I think the dust has settled. It's given everyone a chance to sort of accept where where we are and where we're going to be, and yeah, try and sort of regroup a little bit and move on to a really important summer for the whole club, really.
Yeah, it's a big summer on and off the pitch for the club. I think that's fair to say. We've seen staff go, we've seen players go, we've seen board members go, and I'm sure there'll be even more departures over the next few weeks, and hopefully some arrivals eventually. Um, but we're going to get straight into it and talk all about the current Luton Town squad. Obviously, we've seen players like Bell and Pelly leave in the last couple of weeks, but we'll be talking about everyone that remains. And as at the time of recording, there are 29 players in that in the squad or in and around the squad, and we'll be sort of brushing over each position rather than going into a lot of detail in each one. So you don't have to worry about sitting here for 2.5 hours and listening to us talk on. Before that, don't forget to check us out on social media at Oak Road Hatter, where you can find all the latest content that's written and podcasts to keep you updated with everything Luton Town over the summer. Let's get straight into it, and we'll start in goal. Obviously, in that area of the pitch, we've got Thomas Kaminski, James Shea, and Jack Walton, who has returned from his loan. Jamie, what are your thoughts on the goalkeeper position?
Um, an interesting one, I think, for me. I think it would be safe to say that we'd all wouldn't mind having Kaminsky around for next season. Whether he wants to stay or not, I'm not sure. Um, that being said, I think my view is that it could be somewhere that we have a bit of a refresh. I think Kaminsky has been clearly a top tier shot stopper for us, but I guess for me, always question marks on distribution, etc. So maybe we can really have a refresh and invest for the future. I mean, again, I don't want to get caught on the past, but I was banging on about Michael Cooper being available for sort of 2 or 3 million last summer, and he's now vying for a spot in the Premier League with Sheffield United, and probably is going to be part of the England setup at some point. So it's an area that you can certainly invest for the future in. I think there's quite a few options out there in terms of younger ones. So if he does want to leave, then I wouldn't see it as a negative too much. I think if we can invest and get a right number one option to sort of be with us for a while. That being said, I don't think we've been the most convincing in our recruitment in that area. Certainly in the last decade, I think um, the whole debacle to sign him in the first place. I mean that we were linked with about 10 keepers that summer, so I doubt Kaminsky was even our first choice back then anyway. Albeit it's worked out to be a good signing. Before that, even Horvath was okay on loan. I mean, obviously it was more like okay, he was good. He was good for us. He got us promoted, but clearly wasn't good enough to be signed permanently. Before that, then you got the likes of Sluga, etc. So um, it's been a role that I think we've struggled in to recruit properly for quite some time. So if Kaminsky does leave, then maybe we can find someone a bit more permanent in that position. Outside of that, Shea, I think he's gonna see out his career with Luton now, and he's someone that obviously we love to have around. Whether he would compete for number one spot in the scenario where Kaminsky departs, I don't think so. But he's an excellent number two to have. Um, but then on number two, Jack Walton comes back in, and um, that's also interesting because he's had two pretty good loan spells. He's first of all got promoted with Dundee United and got into the top flight of Scottish football, and then he's kept him there, and sort of in the process kept a decent number of clean sheets. A similar type of keeper to Kaminsky, I think. I think he's a great shot stopper. Maybe not so much with his feet in terms of distribution. I was looking at a few stats before coming on here, and I think he's net 7.6 goals saved in terms of comparing the amount of goals you conceded versus the sort of the XG on target you conceded. So he's definitely a net positive goalkeeper. So maybe he's one that can fight for number one. But who knows? I think that there could certainly be some rotation through the summer in that position. There could be a chance, right, that 2 out of the 3 leave us, and we bring not 1 but 2 in. So yeah, I think it's one to watch the space over the summer.
And Adam, do you think it'll be a position that we look to recruit in?
Yeah, I mean, I think Jamie's pretty much spot on with that, if I'm honest. Like, I don't disagree with much of that. I think if everyone was given the choice, we'd probably rather keep Kaminsky than let him go. But equally, he's going to have aspirations of making the Belgium team next summer for the Euros, which is probably going to be his last opportunity. I know he sits on the bench as sort of third choice, but he's still going to want to go there and have that on his CV, right? So, you know, is his agent, is he going to be happy playing third tier English football? Probably not. So I can see that one happening. I could see him going to the majority of championship clubs. So it wouldn't surprise me at all if Kaminsky did move on. If that were to happen, I think we would need to recruit. I think I like James Shea. I've always got time for James Shea. And I certainly would keep him at the club even as a number 2. Like, you know, he's not really been a number 2 this year, is he? But, you know, he's more than good enough to stay around in that capacity, and again gives you that experience that we desperately need as well. I think with Walton, I'm not convinced. You know, we signed him in January 2023, and we've never seen him, and I'm not convinced that he's the guy to step up if we do lose Kaminsky. And it's hard to judge that because we have never seen him, but something just says to me that he will either leave the club again on loan, or we've triggered that extension in his contract to sell him, maybe. So I think, yeah, you know, if we can keep all 3, then great. But I think there is a very good chance that, you know, particularly Kaminsky, but maybe even Walton as well, could leave the club.
I think the only one that's clear is that James Shea will probably be at the club come the end of the transfer window. He seems to be someone who's never going to kick up a fuss about not being first choice. Obviously, there's not really been a sustained period when he's been at Luton when he's been first choice, actually, and he seems content in his role as a backup / commentator. So you'd imagine he'll be quite happy staying in that area. Moving on to defence, we'll start in sort of the right wing back position, and we've obviously got Roel Walters and Hashioka if he is not missing anymore, because who knows where Hashioka is. We'll start with, actually I wanted to start on Walters specifically, and Adam, I'll come to you, because for me, I think whilst we did see him struggle a bit last season, I think it's his opportunity to really cement himself in the side and sort of establish himself as a senior player.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I thought he started the season pretty well for us. He then got injured and missed a good chunk of games. I think sort of 14, 15 games. And then by the time he returned around Christmas time or New Year, he came back into a squad and a team that had, you know, zero confidence. And I think it impacted him. And I think anyone that's going to criticise that, it's a little bit harsh, given the guy is 20 years old. He's just stepped out of, you know, 21s football at Arsenal. Doesn't have a load of experience. So I don't think we can really judge him based on his performances when he returned. And really for that reason, I don't think you can discard him. So for me, he's absolutely one to keep hold of. I do think we'll come on to the other options there in that position, but I do think we need to strengthen that area. But I certainly wouldn't be adverse to him, you know, playing for us at right back. And if we do move to a 4 at the back, him being more of that conventional right back than maybe a wing back. So yeah, definitely one one for the future, but also probably one for next season as well.
Just to add to that, I'm pretty big on Walters for next season. I think I'm spot on. And for those that maybe are leaning on the side of wanting him to go, I seriously think he could be one that gets away if he was to sell. And he's probably one of the players, apart from the obvious ones, that obviously Asgard, Doughty, etc., that I would actually be really disappointed with if he was to leave. So yeah, I think he's, for me, starting right back in the back four. I think, like Adam says, I think you probably get rid of Hashioka and you bring someone else in that's happy with maybe starting the season and bedding Walters in and taking a bit of pressure off of him. But I think come late this calendar year, early next, I think Walters comes in and he takes that starting right back spot and he just runs with it.
Yeah, I have to agree. I think Hashioka he's been unfortunate in terms of when he's come into the squad in the Premier League and was playing centre back, and then he was trying to play sort of right back in a team that was just seriously out of form. And at times he did look all right in the Championship, but he had so few opportunities that it's been impossible to see him really get that position and make it his own. And then since I can't remember the last time we actually saw him on the pitch either, and he doesn't seem like a player that kick up a fuss. He seems quite happy as it is, but I just don't think he's going to want to be a backup in League One. And I think for the sake of his career, he probably needs to leave, Adam.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think I looked at some stats the other day, and like since Bloomfield came in, Hashioka wasn't in 14 out of 20 squads, and he was fit because he was training. So I think really that kind of tells you everything you need to know. Like Bloomfield doesn't fancy him, and I think for that reason alone, you'll see him move on this summer. Whether it's a situation where he's maybe loaned back to Belgium or to the Japanese league, I don't know. Maybe he won't be sold directly, but I'm certainly not convinced he'll be at the club too much beyond the end of the transfer window.
And it's a shame, really. We've never really seen him kick on because he was a player that we were all quite excited about when he joined, obviously coming from the Belgian league, Japan international as well, and it's sort of nothing seems to have gone his way. Obviously, I think he's lost his place in the Japan squad as well since we got relegated. So for the sake of his career, he definitely needs to move on. We'll move on to centre back, where bizarrely, for the first time in a long time, we'll be talking about an abundance of players. Obviously, Bell has moved on, and you could sort of say he's a left back stroke centre back. But as we're all assuming we'll be moving to a back four, you can see a few of our centre backs leaving. So I'll just run through the players we've got contracted. Also, bearing in mind, Tom Lockyer isn't contracted to the club, but he is still training or getting back to fitness at the club. So we'll put him aside for now. But we've got Mads Anderson, Mark McGuinness, Ted Mengi, Reece Burke, Christ Makoso, and Tom Holmes, who has returned from his loan. Is there anyone there, Jamie, that stands out to you as someone who will be on their way out probably sooner rather than later?
Well, I guess there's two ends of the spectrum, right? It's who will be on the way out because they want to be on the way out, and who will be on the way out because we want them on the way out. I think on the first part, I think Ted and Mengi is probably the obvious one, right? There's these reports and rumours that there were a few first team players that were absent from pre-season last summer, and you can probably bet your bottom dollar that Tedden was part of that group. So yeah, it's a shame because in the Premier was awesome for us, and I guess it warrants his views that he deserves better than I guess our current league status. But yeah, it's just a shame the way things are unfolding with that particular situation. I'd still want some money for him. I certainly wouldn't let him go for nothing. I think at this point, you don't want to act like it, but stick him in the 21s if he's going to try and get out for free. When I appreciate we only spent the best part of like £1 million for him, which in the grand scheme of things is not a lot, but he like we were talking last summer, like you could probably find a podcast less than 12 months ago where I'm saying I want 20 million for Mengi. So to say now that you want to get rid of him for nothing would just be a bit drastic, personally. So I'd be like, Ted, and your asking price is 5 million. even I think that's probably a bit of an undersell. But given, I guess, form the last 12 months, injury obviously he's had, he always come back. I think asking for much more probably is a bit too much. But say that if a club wants you for 5 million quid, which there's two League One promoted teams that have that sort of money and can spend it pretty easily in Birmingham and Wrexham. So if they're desperate for someone like Teddy Mengi, then all they've got to do is give us 5 million and he can go on his way to the Championship again. So um, he's the obvious one I think in that group that will probably be gone between now and the end of August.
And Adam, is there anyone else that really jumps out at you as a player that probably needs to leave for the sake of what we've got on the pitch and also their own career? I think for me, Mads Anderson is probably past his sell-by date at Luton, I'll say.
Yeah, I think there's a couple, and you've just named one of them. Obviously, if Anderson does leave, Jamie will be devastated. The Anderson fan club will be disbanded. But I do think, as you just said, it's the best thing for him, for us as a club. It's just one that hasn't worked, right? Like, there's no doubt he's a good centre half, and I think he got League One Team of the Year with Barnsley last time he was in that league, and then he obviously came to us. But 5 million quid. I mean, I don't know how many games he's played. I wouldn't like to guess, but he's not really been fit, has he, at all, for long periods. So I think he's one that will move on. And we've seen today that I think Malmo in Sweden are interested in picking him up. So yeah, I would say he's definitely one to make way. The other one for me, I think, is going to be Tom Holmes. Again, I don't have anything against him personally, but we saw him shipped off pretty quickly when Bloomfield came in, and that's even when we were thinking about going, back to a back three, because Bloomfield started us off with a four at the back. So I think, again, a bit like Hashioka, I think that kind of says a lot about Holmes and his future with us. So yeah, the three we've mentioned really, Mengi, Anderson, and Holmes, I would move on. Obviously, we discount Lockyer, and I think that leaves us with Burke, McGuinness, and Makoso. Any others that I've missed there in terms of that would stay or that we would be keeping?
No, that's all three.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, again, like that's three pretty good. I'd keep all those three. It also gives the opportunity to bring one in, and I know Bloomfield's going to want to freshen things up. So I think certainly down the spine of the team. So, yeah, I think those three that we just mentioned would stay, and we have an opportunity to bring another one in as well.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think on Tom Holmes, just quickly, he got shipped out to Belgium for a team called Dender, who, let's be honest, none of us had heard of before January this year, and he's now barely got a game for them in the bottom half of the Belgian league. So I know we're going down to League One, but yeah, I think it's time for him probably to find a fresh club and get a fresh start. I think there's probably a slight debate on Reece Burke. Now, I love Reece Burke. I think if he had two working legs, then he would be our best centre half, and I think we would have done a lot better both last season and in the Prem if we had a fit Reece Burke for what was the best part of 80 games over those 2 seasons. But the fact is he isn't, and therefore I think he's down the pecking order behind McGuinness and Mikoso because of that. Now, I don't want to carry injured players, but I think Reece Burke probably is one that is worth carrying. It probably means that you need 5 centre halves though, just in case. You probably sign 2 if you keep Mikoso, McGuinness, and Burke. But I think Burke is worth carrying because I think when he's fit and when he's at his best, he's way too good for League One, and also he has the flexibility of being able to sort of shift into right back, for example, as well. So I think whilst there probably is a debate on stay or go given his injury record, I think he's one that we can probably carry.
Do you think keeping Burke, and obviously that you mentioned there, bringing in 2 centre backs is potentially a difficult choice, not just for the club but also any player coming in, because they'll understand that there'll be one of 5 centre backs who's likely playing in a back 4. Is it hard to recruit a player to be that 5th choice centre back?
Uh, Probably, but then you could recruit smart. Like you could find a younger option from like a League Two level, and he he knows he's coming in to be a bit more of an option as like that fifth choice. I mean, Mikoso was brought in to be a bit of a development option, I think, at the time, and it only got to go because of our situation. Now, if I'm a 21-year-old lad and I look at our injury record over the last two or 3 years, I'll be like, well, it only takes a couple of injuries and I'm getting my chance. So, yeah, I definitely think there'll be players out there. Or look, I mean, you could even get an Amari Bell sort of version 2, right? That is a left-footed centre half, but can play left back. So I think it's a bit drastic sometimes to sort of maybe pigeonhole players into a centre half. You can definitely get a flexible option in there for sure.
A player we haven't touched on is obviously Cal Naismith, who's no longer at the club. He returned to Bristol, but is now left Bristol. The club had a weird little comment in the retained list with him, so I think that makes the assumption quite comfortably that he will be returning. Adam, he sort of does that or fills that role Jamie's just mentioned, where he can play in more than one position as well as centre back.
Yeah, I mean, if it was down to me, I'd sign him tomorrow. And I know there was some comments around like, well, do we need another centre half? But we will need another centre half, and what we're lacking really in all of those that we've mentioned about keeping is a left-footed centre half. So if you're telling me that you've got a left-footed centre half available who knows the club, is experienced, has leadership qualities, the only question mark is he willing to drop down to League One? Now, I personally think that given his injury record of late, he should be happy to do that, because this is a guy that's probably got one more contract somewhere in him, maybe 2 or 3 years. So why not do it at a club that inside out and the fans really like you? So yeah, for me, look, if we had one centre half gap to fill, I would probably go down that route of someone more experienced and a real voice within the squad or off the pitch, but also on the pitch as well.
And that brings us on to that left side of the pitch as well, and that left side of defence. In the left back position, which unfortunately we are now going to have to talk about Alfie Doherty and the potential for him to, I think the likelihood that he leaves the club is very high. And if he does, that only leaves us with Joe Johnson, Jamie. Do you think it's likely at all that Alfie stays?
No, I mean, I think it's unlikely. I think is it impossible? Well, no, because he signed a 4-year deal. I think it was in January. I think he signed it. I think it's a 4-year deal. I think it was certainly like a long-term deal. And people have to pay the money. Now, I just signed a £5 million price tag on Mengi. Now, for me, I think Doubt is going to be north of 7 or 8. Personally, I mean, I think we got what was it, 6+4 for James Justin on the back of the League One or on the back of the League One campaign. Now, Doubt he's had 30 games in the Prem. He's had 30 games in the Championship, and he hasn't looked at a place at all. So, for me, I would want 10 plus, but maybe if you just shake hands on 8 because it's a player that wants to go and you can probably reinvest 8 million fairly wisely, you probably say thanks Alfie and good luck. But there's obviously a chance that no one pays that money, and I certainly wouldn't be accepting it any lower than 7 or 8. So if a bid doesn't come in that meets our number, then for me he's got to stick around, and I don't think Alfie would do that, but if he does a Mengi and throws his toys out the pram, then I think you just have to hold on to him, because it could be that actually no, you loan him out for a season, you get up back to the Championship, then he comes back and he wants to play for us again. So I don't think you can take a price cut on a pretty valuable asset.
And you mentioned there the potential to loan him out, and then have him back, providing we get promoted next season. That actually hadn't occurred to me as an option. I don't know about you, Adam. It wasn't something I'd thought of doing if he is looking for a way out. But I think actually, if we don't need to make a profit, which at the moment I don't think we really need to be looking for money for many players, it's probably quite a sensible choice if it means we can keep hold of him.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I'd prefer an all or nothing situation where, like, we either say or he says or whatever, you're not going anywhere, or we sell him and we get that money and we can actually invest it in the rest of the squad, because obviously we know that sort of money that Jamie's talking about. And figures wise, I generally agree with that. Like we're not dropping into League One with no money. We're still getting 43 million or whatever it is in parachute payments this summer. So you can afford to hold out for someone's value, and I think the 7-8 million is probably the minimum for Doughty. So look, I'd prefer to keep him or make the permanent move. But if a Championship club came in and said we'll take him off you for 12 months and we'll pay the bulk of his wages, then again, like I'm fine with that. The only other thing, obviously, a left back, it leaves us a bit short, doesn't it? And Doughty, is he a left back? Can he play left back in a 4? Probably can, but he's obviously got a very, very attacking mindset. So my only concern around that is, do you cash in this summer because you want to move to a 4 at the back? And obviously, then we've touched on Joe Johnson, and I think Johnson's going to be a good player. I don't really personally see the hype right now that other people do. Like when he's featured, he's done all right, but he can't. For me, he's not ready to be our starting left back. Like there's no way in hell he's ready for that. I mean, if Doughty stayed and you got another one in, then I'd argue that Johnson could be loaned out to League Two. But I think that's obviously a bit of a hypothetical there. But if we move Doughty on, we've absolutely got to sign a left back, and hopefully a conventional left back in the sense of one that can play as a left back, but also the ability to play wing back if we rotate between those formations.
I think if Doughty stayed, and I don't think it's going to happen, I think Joe Johnson you keep around as your second choice, especially in the situation where you also sign Cal Naismith, where you've then got, I guess, two and a half options there at left back, where you've got Doughty as the clear cut first choice, Joe Johnson you can give him a go, but without the pressure, and actually if he does struggle, then you've got Cal Naismith that can play there as well. So I think that for me would be almost utopia, right? Where you keep your best player, you allow one of your youngsters who quite clearly has the promise. I mean, he wouldn't be in the under-19 Euros team for nothing, right? And then you also have Cal Naismith who has the experience, who you primarily is a left at the back in a 4, but can play left back as well. So that would be the utopian situation. Now, in the realistic situation, Doughty goes. I would still keep JJ around. I think he still could be that second choice left back option, but then you need to sign that out and out first choice left back. And I agree with Adam's views that maybe he's not the ideal left back in a 4 Alfie Doughty, but I think it works because he spent a lot of his time playing left centre back in a 3 in the Premier League, right? So it's obvious that he can defend, and there was times where actually he switched with JJ and put JJ at left wing back because Alfie Doughty was the better defender. So I certainly think Doughty can play left back in a 4, albeit I know he's very attacking, but I think that will work to our advantage.
Yeah, Adam, you mentioned there that Johnson not needing to be registered helps. Obviously, with him being under 21, he's still got a lot of developing to do, obviously, with that. But it gives us that depth in that position without having to register a player, so we can bring in someone else. I just wanted to touch on something you mentioned there. You said we've got about 43 million coming in League One, which is, when you think about it, a pretty crazy amount of money to be getting as a League One club, especially when you compare it to the budgets we'll likely be competing against in this division. So we really need to be making ourselves the big dogs or the big fish in this pond. I'm not sure why there'd be a dog in a pond, but the big fish in a very small pond, I guess. And you both mentioned that likely as a championship club coming in. Do you think it's completely unlikely that a Premier League club would still be after Alfie? The only one that springs to mind for me is Leeds United, who are in contract negotiations with both of their left back options as we speak. So Firpo and Sam Byram, who's sort of a left back stroke right back. But they're the only side I could see potentially looking at bringing someone like Alfie in, because they do play very attacking fullbacks.
I can certainly see a Premier League team going for him. I mean, don't rule out Burnley potentially as well. I think that they play with very attacking wide players, and I think he could fit their system pretty well. So now, I mean, I think people might doubt whether getting a Premier League club in for one of our players is realistic, but I certainly wouldn't rule it out. And of all the players in our squad right now, I think Doughty is probably the one that's most likely to get bids from the top flight.
And that's everything for this part of the episode. We're going to go to a quick break now. We'd love to know your thoughts on the defenders and the goalkeeper. So let us know in the comments on this video or on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to your podcasts, what your thoughts are. But we're going to go for a quick break. Don't forget to check out oakroadhatter.com, where you can find our latest written content and our up-to-date podcasts and merch. But we'll be back shortly. Welcome back to Oak Road Hatter, where I'm still joined by Jamie and Adam. And now we're going to talk about the midfield, where there's a lot of players to discuss of differing ability and probably a public opinion as well. So we're going to start off in the defensive midfield area, where we've got Marvellous Nakamba, we've got Lamine Fane, and then we're also going to include Baptiste and Walsh in there as well, because they sort of play slightly deeper roles in our midfield. And Jamie, I wanted to start with you. I just wanted to talk to you about sort of who you can see starting in that role in League One and who you can see likely leaving.
It's a tough one. So I think let's start with Liam Walsh. I think Liam Walsh was clearly one of our best midfielders towards the end of the season. It seems like he's sticking around, which I think is a positive. I think technically one of our better players. So I certainly think he's got a chance of starting in that midfield. I mean, I would pair him a bit more with Jordan Clark. I mean, the way I picture the 4-2-3-1 is you've got a more defensively minded one in like a Nakamba or a Fane that let's say, and then you've got, I guess, a midfielder that can play deeper but equally has a bit more on the ball ability in sort of Clark, Walsh, Baptiste. Is that's the way I see it in my head in terms of the way I group it. Now, I guess in the defensive side, Nakamba and Fane. I mean, look, if there are two options, then fine. I mean, Nakamba clearly, when he's at his best, is definitely at least League One level. Now, injuries is an option. It's not an option; it's an issue. Like maybe he's sort of in that bracket of, look, if he stays, then fine. But if we can get money for him, or if we can get his wages off the wage bill, then also fine. I think it's probably one that we need to be flexible over the summer. And then on Fane, I mean, he's been linked with a move to the Spanish top flight, which is interesting. It would be a shame to see him go. I think almost a bit in the Walters bracket, where could be one that gets away a little bit if he was to go elsewhere and find and I guess find a good home. But ultimately, if we can get money for someone that we signed a year ago and it's good money, and if it's a Spanish top flight, then maybe we can get a decent sell-on clause in there if he really does sort of go really well. Then that also wouldn't be a negative. So lots of churn in that area. Then, yeah, I mean, Clark, Walsh, and Baptiste. I think that Baptiste's injuries clearly have been a bit of a talking point throughout the season. But let's not get away from the fact that when fit, he is absolutely better than League One level. So if we can find some fitness in him, I mean, he probably signed a 3-year deal last summer, maybe a 2+1 1-year option. I don't think he's going to get too great of a contract elsewhere if he was to force a move, given that injury record. So he's one that's probably satisfied with staying around. And if we, like I said, if we can get him fit, then he can be a great player for this level. But then you've got Clark and Walsh, who equally are really good as well. So, I mean, that midfield on paper already, even without additions, is looking fairly strong. And again, I watched a lot of the League One playoffs, and these are teams that are supposedly the best of the best in League One, and they didn't look exactly strong in midfield. And based on those names that I've just read out in those sort of central midfield area, we should be able to play teams off the park personally. Not sure if that's me looking through things with a bit of a Luton tinted glasses like perspective, but the way Liam Walsh and Jordan Clark and obviously Asgard we're not mentioned yet because we'll get on to attacking midfielders in a sec, but the way those players are playing towards the end of last season, we were already tracking at a top 6 team on form for the last sort of 10, 15 games. So that they should be more than good enough for this level.
I think I'm really torn on the defensive midfielders, and I agree in terms of categorising Nakamba, Fane, and Baptiste, and because of the position we've put ourselves in, we are going to be punished to a certain extent with a little bit of a lack of control in some instances, and needing to sort of look at it and go, right, well, I don't really want to sell you, but it's quite a good offer. And it's there's going to be a couple of scenarios where we're going to need to go, okay, actually this is probably reluctantly we're going to sell you. I do think you have control over certain players, and we'll come on to the likes of Asgard in a second because that's a different story. I think with Fane, it's just we obviously signed him with an eye to the future, and no one saw that future being in League One. Like not the club, not him when he signed. So I think for me, you almost got to look at that one and go, I think you reluctantly sell, and you just you kind of close that chapter, accept that we've kind of messed up a little bit in that sense, and also then it gives you an opportunity potentially to bring another body into midfield. Nakamba's the one also that I'm, or the main real one that I'm torn on in that position, because he'll always be remembered pretty fondly in terms of like the January to May of the promotion season and like just how impactful he was. I just think with the sort of money he's likely to be on, and he's probably got 1 year left, I think. I think it might be a time where you go, yeah, all right, well, let's come to an agreement where we pay off maybe 6 months and we move him on. I don't know that we can afford to carry too many into next season. I agree around making the exception for Burke. I don't think there's too many more that I'd make an exception for, and I think for that reason, I would probably come to an agreement, and I'd probably move on Nakamba personally.
I think for me, seeing Nakamba leave would be, and not just for me actually, for probably most Luton fans, seeing him leave would be really hard because of how much he does mean to the fans in terms of how quickly he has become part of sort of not the furniture as such, because he's much more important than that, but a mainstay at Luton and how loved he is. So seeing him leave would be really tough, but I think you're absolutely right. The wages you'd expect him to be on when we signed him from Aston Villa, who were a Premier League club at the time of signing, he's, in my mind, he's probably anywhere up to 30,000 a week he's probably earning, or before relegation he might have been earning that. And he's a player that, again, he's past 30 now, he's struggling with injuries a bit. And yeah, for the sake of us and sustainability as well financially, he's probably a player we need to look to move on, just because we won't be making enough money to justify his wages. And I think it will be tough for Luton fans when he does leave, but probably a necessary decision. Jamie, I just wanted to ask you a bit more about Fano, because if he does leave, and there's been links to La Liga, which would be somewhat surprising, I think, if he does go to La Liga. I know he has that Spanish sort of heritage, but he's not really been impressive enough to go to the Spanish First Division, if you ask me. But maybe it's a club that were interested in him before we signed him. Do you think that's Luton really missing the ball on him and not being able to establish him in the team?
I think towards the sort of the end of the season, you clearly started to get in the team, and I think you got 4 or 5 games in a row. I think before then was probably just a fact of circumstance, and Bloomfield didn't want to risk a young player in a situation where we just needed to get points wherever we could. I think if he stays, I think he's nailed on to be a starter. Personally, I think that there'll be an agreement where look now, okay, we'll back you and we'll give you the chance that you deserve. You stuck with us, and I certainly think he could be a top player for us. I think on the I guess the links with Spain, I could personally see it. I think he was in an AIK team playing really well. They loved him. Who got European football. signed for a newly relegated Premier League team with the intent that he'd come to us in January and try and get us onto promotion. Now, clearly, circumstance didn't play out that way. It was only six months ago that he was at ARK fighting for that top three finish in Sweden. So for a team in the top flight, and now, I mean, I guess it depends what part of Spain, right? It's clearly not going to be the Madrids and Barcelonas, but you've got sort of the lower end like Vallecano, Valladolid. I think, I mean, it's in Div 2, but Charlie Patino went to Deportivo La Coruña in the second tier. Now there's going to be teams in that sort of lower echelon that are probably thinking that they could get a right bargain, and get someone that has potentially so much upside, and that could be the difference at that lower end of that level. Because I don't think that bottom half of the Spanish top flight is entirely great, to be honest. So I could certainly see someone like that going in and going for him.
Yeah, in case you couldn't tell, Jamie's been doing a bit of Duolingo Spanish in his spare time. Those pronunciations, that was excellent Spanish grammar there, Jamie. But no, I can see what you're coming from there. He was a player that would have been playing in the Europa Conference League in the season coming, and I'm sure he'll be pretty gutted about where he's really ended up as a result of a move which I'm sure he thought would keep him towards the upper ends of the Championship, if not in the Premier League. I'd be disappointed if he leaves. I think we were starting to see him really come into his own in the last few games of the season. But yeah, I can understand if he does leave. But hopefully, if he does, we can get somewhat of a profit or there or thereabouts for him. That brings us on to the attacking midfield area. And we'll quickly touch on Jordan Clark because I think we're all in agreement he needs to be kept at the club at all costs. And with his age, I think it'd be fairly easy to keep hold of him. It's unlikely that many clubs would be in for him, although Wrexham are one club that I think maybe they'd look at someone like Jordan Clark and look at what he's done already. They're not against signing older players when you look at some of the players they've got at the club already, and he's one that I'm sure would shine in most teams in the Championship, Adam.
Yeah, I mean, I think he could be one that actually draws quite a bit of attention. Because he's been a pretty consistent performer for us. So I know he missed a fair amount of the Premier League season, but you think he scored the goal in the playoff final. He was pivotal that season. He's picked up all of our awards this season. Although I think one of us three probably could have done that as well. But I just think he's one we've really got to keep again. Not only is he a very good footballer technically and can play in that traditional centre mid or the attacking midfield role. He's got the experience and I think he's got the leadership. And I've alluded to it a few times. I think he should have been our captain when Lockyer is not playing. So I think for me he's an absolute must keep hold of. And yeah, I'm not sure what his contract situation is, but I'd be majorly disappointed if we end up losing Jordan Clark.
And Jamie, I can see from your nodding there that you share those thoughts, and I think you'll struggle to find any Luton fan that doesn't want to keep hold of him. You can see him in League One being just above and beyond the sort of competition you're up against in there, and he's a player that could really, really excel in that league and look far better than the division. It almost makes me think of when Barry Bannon dropped down to that league with Sheffield Wednesday, and he just looked a class above.
Yeah, no, I agree completely. I think he's definitely a hard keep. And he's just that Mr. Reliable. And I think promotion winning teams need those players that aren't superstars, that they're you can expect to get a 7 or 8 out of 10 from him week in, week out. And you look at players like Josh Cullen at Burnley. He's not a superstar. He's not the sort of the big name in that Burnley team, but in that midfield, he's just the reliable player that just plays week in, week out, puts in a 7 or 8 out of 10, and ultimately has the consistency to get a team promoted. So, yeah, I agree. I think whether Jordan Clark is captain this season depends on who we bring in and who we sign. I think, but I think he's certainly going to be part of that leadership group if we can keep him. and I think he'll stay around. I can't see him forcing a move. I think he appreciates what the club has done for him as well, because ultimately he was just the right midfielder for Maccleston Stanley. We took a gamble on bringing him in, made him a centre mid, and he then got to the Prem. So I think he's the sort of player that would stick around, and if he does, then I think we'll be a better Luton team for it.
And that brings us on to our attacking midfielders. And there's only really two of them that we're going to discuss here because we've moved Chong into the forward line. And first of all is Asgard, and he really is the standout player at the club, technically, I think. Anyone would agree he's got to be number one priority for the players we look to keep hold of. And annoyingly, the Norway coach has supposedly come out and said that he needs to move to a higher division if he wants to continue playing in that Norway squad. First of all, I think it's pretty ironic that Norway, who I don't know when they last qualified for a European competition, are now demanding their players move to better leagues to actually get in the squad, because for how long they had pretty subpar players in that squad. Apologies to any Norwegians. I know we have a lot of Scandinavian hatters actually, but I'm sure you'll be in agreement with me that you'd rather not see Asgard leave the club. For me, he's got to be number one priority to keep hold, and we've got to build that team around him. And I'm sure you're both in agreement somewhat there, Adam.
Yeah, well, firstly, Finn, you've just lost us a whole nation of listeners and viewers. So great work on that. But yeah, I mean, obviously, it goes without saying. Like, if any Luton fan doesn't think keeping Asgard as essential, then you're absolutely mad. I don't really understand the whole concept of the manager's comments. Solbakken, ironically, who got canned by Wolves after we dumped him out of the FA Cup years ago, so he's not bitter at all still. But, he signed for us in a relegation battle in January. So unless we've done anything stupid like put a relegation release clause in there, which essentially sees us get our money back, I'm not convinced he will go. Now, clearly, I think there's an element of the national manager probably in partnership with his agent thinking what sort of move can we get him. But this is one I'm talking about where I mentioned earlier on about certain players that we're going to have to bite the bullet and say, we're going to reluctantly sell because of our situation. I don't think the rules apply to Asgard. For me, this is the player above all, in terms of probably his age, determines how serious we are about getting back into the championship at the first attempt. If we let Asgard walk away, or we've been stupid enough to put a clause in that can let him walk away, then that to me just says everything around how serious we are. So I mentioned about being, extremely disappointed if Clark left the club. I think I'd be, equally or more disappointed if we end up losing Asgard this summer.
Yeah, spot on. I think if obviously unless there's some clause in it on relegation, if it doesn't start with a 1 and have 7 more numbers after it, then I don't really want to know, to be honest. I think the starting point's got to be 10 mil. Anything less than that, I think you just laugh them out the room. I was saying sort of to friends and family sort of around Asgard. Had we stayed up, I could have really envisaged him being a Premier League player in the season after next. I think he could have done 46 championship games. We could have been a standout player for us, and a Premier League club would have absolutely gone for him. So he is that good for me. I mean, on the Norwegian coach comments, I mean, I was chatting to a Blades fan who apparently he said the same thing about Sander Berger when the Blades got relegated. So I think he's got form, to be honest. So I wouldn't read too much into it. I think Asian talk probably is about right. But yeah, Asgard, number one player to keep, above Doughty, above anyone else in that squad. He is, absolute must keep. And if we do, we've got a League One player of the season on our hands.
The key thing is we don't have to sell players because of the financial position we're in. And if we do, you'd like to think the first players out the door who can make some profit would be Mengi, then probably Alfie, maybe reluctantly as well. I'd say they've got to go way before we sell Asgard. And yeah, but you're both in agreement there. Obviously, not in agreement with my accidental insult to the entirety of Norway. I'm sure it's a lovely place, and I actually would like to visit sometime. So, if and when I do visit, I won't be mentioning those comments in public. But we'll move on to our other midfielder, and that's Zach Nelson. And obviously, I think for me, he's got to be kept and got to be in and around that squad a bit more, the first team squad, as he was at the start of the season.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I think, again, I'm not quite seeing the hype, maybe. But this is a kid, like he's not needing to be registered next season, obviously due to his age. So he's definitely one to keep in and around the squad. Like, if you can't introduce a player like that at League One level in parts, then what's the point in having the academy running? I think he's ahead of Johnson in terms of that development and ability for me. But yeah, I think Nelson's definitely one you keep around, and you keep in the environment, you keep learning off of the likes of Clark and Asgard and some of the wingers as well. So yeah, keeping Nelson is a no-brainer.
I'm a bit more positive on Nelson personally. I think we could not have the more perfect backup option for Asgard if we keep Asgard. I think in terms of rotation, in terms of player, in terms of ability, in terms of academy prospects, potential, everything. I think Nelson could be. He could have a breakout season for us. I think obviously Asgard will limit number of starts if we can keep him. But if Asgard goes, is Nelson good enough to be the first choice? Probably not. But you probably don't have to sign an Asgard again to balance that out. I think Nelson could certainly take half the games next year. I think. And look, worst case, you've got John Clark there as well, right? A bit like the left back situation where you can have Naismith that goes out to left back. I think Clark can also go into number 10 as well. So for me, I think Nelson is absolutely in the squad, and I'm feeling positive about what he can do for us next season.
Yeah, I think he's an exciting player, and he has shown real signs of what he can do. Most notably, obviously, being that absolute wonder goal at QPR away in the EFL Cup. And if he's got that in his locker, then just imagine what he can do when he's playing in League One. I think it's a real opportunity for him to establish himself as potentially a starter, either in one of those wide positions, maybe, which we'll discuss a bit more when we talk about the forwards. But he's a really exciting young player, and I think he's probably, you could argue, he's been our most exciting young player since James Justin. I don't think that's a tough comment to make there. I don't know if you agree there, Adam.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. Like, I do like him, and I think he's got some serious talent. I just probably haven't seen much of it to make me think he's ready to go. Like, I do think if we lost Asgard, you've got to get another attacking midfielder in that can probably be that starter. But no, by no means do I think we get rid of him or loan him out. Like, he is more than capable to play League One football. And next season is the perfect opportunity. As much as we've had a tough few weeks and it's a pretty shit time for the club. This is a good opportunity to see more of the likes of Johnson and particularly in my mind Nelson as well.
Yeah, and that brings us on to the forwards, who we've briefly just mentioned the winger positions there as well. We'll be talking about those wingers as well, and we're going to start with Jones, Ali, and Brown, and Chong actually, who, in my opinion, the most likely to play in those wide positions. And we'll start with the players that we definitely want to keep hold of, because for me, I think that's Jones and Ali, and then we can work from there. But those two are, for me, arguably starting wingers in League One. If we can keep hold of Jones, I think that'd be really good, because he has shown some real promising signs in the Championship, and we know his ability from when he was at Middlesbrough. So if you can really get him settled and give him the freedom to get forward, he could be a really dangerous player in League One. And then Ali has been one of the standout signings for us in, well, a long time actually. He's looked really positive, particularly in the last few games, and is a real threat in front of goal, and also has a really fun chant to come with that, which we won't be singing on the podcast, but Yeah, I think everyone knows what I'm talking about. And if we lose, I don't think we're likely to lose him, but I think it's a real opportunity for him to establish himself as a starter in the team.
Yeah, on Ali, I agree. I'm pretty comfortable with him staying. I don't think he'll go. I mean, this is a player that jumped from the conference to extra League One, and then half a year later jumped to us in the Championship. So I think he's someone that now just needs a full season to sort of do a third move in as many windows would probably be a slight stretch. So yeah, I think I'm fairly comfortable that Ali will stay, and that is absolutely excellent. I think he's starting left winger for us. And yeah, I'm positive about what he can do in League One. On Izzy Jones, probably less comfortable. I think he's probably one that could itch for a move, and you can see it. I mean, um, he's a player that clearly was one of the best wing backs in the league just 3 seasons ago. He yeah, he's definitely championship ability. Whether someone will want to pay what we want for him is probably the next question. I mean, we signed him, I think, for around 4 to 5 million in January. Now, I don't want to take a haircut on that just 6 months later, right? So, if we can get our money back for him, then you probably accept it. Anything less, then you probably say, Sorry, Izzy, but we want you to stay." And yeah, I'll be intrigued to see how that situation plays out. But I would try and be as strong as we can to keep him. Now, if it's Jones or Asgard, then clearly you're keeping Asgard all day long, right? So he's one that I'll be less fussed about letting go of. But ultimately, if we can keep all three of Ali, Asgard, and Izzy Jones, then you I think you're laughing in terms of a sort of an attacking midfield three behind a striker. You won't get any better than that in League One, and that's better than probably the bottom 25 percentile of the Championship. So yeah, I'd be really really happy with that sort of attacking midfield three.
And you heard it here first. Jamie won't take a haircut for Izzy Jones, but would he take a haircut for Tahith Chong, who we're discussing next? And I think it's fair to say he's been somewhat of a disappointment since we signed him with quite big expectations or hopes, optimism maybe, in the Premier League. And whilst he has shown a few signs of being a talented player, he has got something, which is obviously why we signed him from Birmingham, albeit his best ever performance was against Luton for Birmingham. And we've mentioned it multiple times. That's probably part of the reason why we signed him. For me, I don't think he'll want to stay in League One. And whilst he's not done anything to say he deserves to be in the Championship, I don't think we should be looking to keep hold of him. I just don't think he's showed enough, Adam.
No, I completely agree. I mean, I was sort of looking at stats earlier on, and I'm really struggling to think of a player that I've been more underwhelmed by in my time, and I'm talking about sort of like factors there in terms of like what we've paid for him, the expectation from a player, and I think that expectation comes from the position that he plays, being that sort of like flair attacking midfielder. But I looked earlier on, and we're talking about 7 goals and 1 assist in 69 games in all competitions for an attack minded player. So it's clearly just not enough at all. It's just really quite simply one that you go, he's not one to take down with us. You make him available at a reduced price, maybe half the price of what we paid for him, and you move on, and you just you get someone who, in my mind, is more invested and more of a Luton player. So very easy decision from my perspective that I would move him on.
Yeah, no, I agree there. Sign him for 5, you probably take a couple mil. If you can get anything more than 2.5 million, you probably take it. Because not only will he probably not want to drop down to League One, but if we can keep hold of Ali, Asgard, and Jones, and he's going to be second choice behind those three, right? So he's not going to want to be League One and on the bench. So yeah, he's probably a fairly easy sell if we can. But I certainly wouldn't let go for nothing. I mean, there's lots of talk about I would be sad to see any of these players go. Get rid of them. I don't care how much, but you need to be a bit sensible here. You can't let Mengi and Tron go for zero, because that's just a bit stupid. You can't overreact and just want to get rid just for the sake of it. So yeah, I'd put a £2 or £2.5 million price tag on him if someone gives us that, and maybe a small little salon as well, just because he knows if he gets back to the chung of what we thought he could be, then there could be some upside there as well. But yeah, he's one that I'd probably say goodbye to.
Yeah, that brings us on to our final sort of wide player. It is wide player stroke forward, and that's Jacob Brown, who again is a player that we've seen really promising signs for. And I think for me, he's not a player that would ever kick up a fuss about not being first choice. Um, and it's why it's difficult to decide whether I think we should keep him in League One, because he has had some injury problems, but he has also shown some really positive signs, Jamie.
Yeah, no, I agree. He's one I keep around. I think injury problems obviously is an issue. Had a couple of ops, I think, now, so hopefully that might see the back of it, because that shows that it's maybe less muscular and reoccurring and more an issue that's been fixed potentially. Hopefully, touch wood. And now if Jones was to leave, I think then he's the shoe in for that right side of that attacking midfield three. And I'd be fairly happy with that. I think obviously I think you'd still need to replace Jones and bring someone in maybe with a bit more pace, but I've liked what I've seen of Jacob Brown. And maybe, who knows, maybe he's that centre forward option. You said he can play both on the right and up top now. Yeah, I think he's certainly got the ability to be that all round centre forward. He's tall enough and strong enough to win the balls in the air and play that Morris well. And I think he's got a bit more pace than Morris, and therefore can play on the shoulder a bit as well. So yeah, someone that hopefully the injury issues are behind him, and can really get a pre-season and sort of get to a level in League One where he can just get some games and go from there.
I mean, I was going to chip in on Brown, but I think as you progress, Jamie, you've covered everything I was going to say. So I think he's definitely one to keep hold of. He's particularly, as you said, you talk about formations and flexibility and keeping and buying players to suit Bloomfield. And Brown, in my mind, can play left of the three, right of the three as a forward. He's quick. Yeah, I know he's on good money, and he will be one of the high earners. But I think he's one of those high earners that I would definitely try and keep around. So completely agree with what you've said.
And that brings us on to the final area of the pitch, and that is the strikers, who we have four of, and it's a bit of an odd assortment of strikers, I would argue. But we'll run through them. We've obviously got Morris, Adebayo, Nordas, and then we've got Woodrow as well, who has returned from his loan. First of all, obviously, Adebayo's out till about January, and it makes it almost impossible to sell him, I would argue, because no one's going to really come in for a player that you don't know where he'll be come next season. So I think he's one that we'll end up keeping. And I guess it's frustrating, Jamie, because we can't really make the profit we would have got if we'd have sold him when we got relegated.
Yeah, no, obviously injuries have led to that. Probably going to be out till the next calendar year, maybe a bit earlier, but yeah, he's one that we're just going to have to probably sit on. We probably won't put him in that squad to start with in the summer, so he might make the squad in January. But yeah, he's part of that Mengi ballpark, right, where you could have asked for 20 million for him last summer, and I probably said the same about Eli, as I did Mengi about that price tag. So more money that we've sort of just chucked down the drain, really.
Adam, do you think he's someone that could potentially come back into the side once he's actually fit and really help us in League One?
Yeah, I do. I think I would have had him in my list of there's no way in hell he stays if he hadn't got injured. Because even a poor performance in the Championship last season, plenty of clubs have taken a punt on Adebayo because of what he is as a striker. But the injury changes it completely. Like, it's not like he's got a little groin strain and he's going to be out for the summer. I don't expect we do see him this calendar year, so I think he will stay. And look, let's be honest. Like, if you get Elijah for 6 months of a League One season, I mean, Jesus, like that's a heck of a player for that level, regardless of what people think about his effort or his finishing ability. Like, let's not kid ourselves. So Adebayo is a definite keep for me for the reasons we mentioned.
And next, that brings us on to Carlton Morris, who obviously captained the side last season. Scored 10 goals in the Premier League, but then 20 goals the season we were promoted, and then last season just really dropped off in all areas of his game. I think it looked like he was carrying an injury for a lot of the season. But for me, I think he's a player that we need to keep hold of, based on the way he spoke in his interviews since the relegation was confirmed. He seems like a player who's actually really determined to stay and get us back up. And I think we need players like that in and around the club, Jamie.
Yeah, he certainly sounded like he wanted to stay and was up for the fight, which is good to see. I certainly went back and captain, as Adam has mentioned several times. I think I'm the Mads Anderson fan club. I think Adam's the Carlton Morris captain fan club, to be honest. So, but yeah, I think I'd keep him around unless someone like a Wrexham wants to give us 5 million or something for him, and I probably would be like, okay, then see you later. But yeah, he's one that I'm very much on the fence about. I think if he stays, I wouldn't be too upset. If he goes, I wouldn't be massively upset either. So yeah, I think a very on the fence answer, but I'm going to leave it at that.
And that brings us, Adam, I guess it's sort of all been covered there in terms of Morris, where obviously you're time and time again, you've said how much you're a fan of his captaincy you are. But in terms of when he is fit, he's a really, really dangerous striker and it causes problems for players all over the pitch.
Yeah, and look again, like, I think you can question what we might have seen from him this season and how he's been at times when everything's been against us. But you're talking about League One football. Like, we saw it on the way up, how big the drop off in class is between League One and the Championship, and we're going to see it again on the way down. So again, if I have a choice of keeping Morris or actively selling him and trying to find a replacement, I think I'd rather keep him. There's no doubt he's been a fantastic player for the club, and as you've said, like both of you said, I've made my point well known about captaincy, but that's just my opinion. Other people might think he is the leader and the best option. I just personally don't. But if it came down to it, I'd rather keep Morris than have to go and actively look for a replacement.
And then that brings us to our other options, and that's part of the pitch. And we've got Las Nordas, who we brought in January and then has struggled to cement himself into the side. He's a player who actually I think showed some impressive signs. Watford away, he looked strong in the opening 5 minutes before he capitulated. Arguably should have had a player for them sent off thanks to his work on the ball. And then at times when he's got the ball in other games, he's looked like he could do something. He just doesn't seem to be really in Matt Bloomfield's favour in the last few games of the season, which I guess he's looking for players that know what they're doing at League One level.
I think he goes in that group with, I guess, Fane and Hashioka, where they've been players that have been signed from overseas that have showed a bit of promise. We've took a gamble on them, but they've each had almost baptism of fires, right? I mean, Hashioka signed in the Prem, had to play everywhere bar his actual position in the Prem, and clearly that knocked him pretty massively. I think Fane came into a situation that he didn't expect. He thought he'd come into a team fighting for sort of promotion or playoffs. And then you got Nordas, who's sort of came in January and expected to get more games maybe than he has, but then Bloomfield's come in. Obviously, he's come in and he's changed a few formations. He's almost gone to Morris and Eli as the two that he can rely upon, not really had the ability to get a run of games. Now I don't think that's his fault necessarily. I think you're right. I think the Watford away performance, I thought I was surprised when he got subbed off. To be fair, I don't know. He's one that you probably would find hard to sell. Unless he goes back to Norway or another Scandinavian league that knows more about him. I don't think another Championship club would take a sort of a punt on him because he's not really shown enough at the level. So he's probably one that's in a bit of a tough situation where he either has to stay or go back to Norway and call it his excursion that went wrong really. So I don't know. I think Adam's really positive about him. I think he thinks he's going to score 20 plus goals next season. So
I
if
didn't
he's
say for
right,
who though.
then
To be fair,
if you're right, then I'll be saying hello to the Championship in about 10 months' time. So
yeah. Just to chip in on Nordas, it's a very difficult one, and I think when you consider that we're likely to move to a 4-2-3-1, and you think about our centre forward options, like you've potentially, and this is all very obviously quite hypothetical, but you've potentially got Morris, you've got the likes of Brown and Ali that can play up front as strikers. You've got Adebayo that you probably know is 6 months away from being back fit, and you may want to bring someone in. You know, whether it's a younger one that can be part of the squad. So I find it hard to see how he stays. And then you also factor in the situation where in crunch games when we've needed goals, Bloomfield's not trusted to bring him on. So I kind of throw him into the situation of like Hashioka and Tom Holmes. I mean, yes, he's made the bench, but I'm not convinced that Bloomfield necessarily wants him around. So I wouldn't be surprised to see him move on. And I think Jamie's spot on. I think that the move he does make is probably back to Norway. And we maybe cut our losses. So it's a difficult one. It's a difficult one. I'd like to see another forward come in, regardless of keeping sort of Adebayo and Morris and a couple of others that can play there. I'd like to see another proper out and out centre forward come in, and for that reason, I think you probably do move Nordas on.
And finally, that brings us on to Cauley Woodrow, who is a much maligned player at Luton Town, and he's had so many people, including all of us. I think we'd be unfair to say we haven't criticised him at times, but he's a player that's been criticised a lot whilst at Luton because of his output in front of goal. We obviously signed him from a League One side when we brought him in from Barnsley, and he's found himself back in League One with us this time. James, I just wanted to come to you first and ask you, what do you think we do with Cauley Woodrow?
pass. I don't know. I don't want to speak too harshly about him because he's a Luton lad, one of our own, etc. So I don't want to be too negative, but yeah, well maybe he'll find his level in League One. I mean, look, he's clearly a goal scorer, right? In terms of like he's that sort of player that doesn't offer too much other than get him in the 18-yard box and he's gonna score you goals. So maybe he might come good next season, but whether we can wait long enough to find out, I don't know. I think as Adam said, I'd like to bring in an option up front just to sort of add a bit of freshness to that forward line. Now, if you do, then you've probably got to say goodbye to one, if not both, of Nordas and Woodrow. So, yeah, it's a tough one. I don't know who would take him. It would probably have to be another League One club. I can't see someone in the Championship going for him. Albeit, I was surprised by Blackburn going for him on loan in January. So who knows, right? There could be an Oxford or a Portsmouth or someone like that goes in for him. But yeah, I think if at all possible, I would get rid, but I just don't see where that comes from right now.
Adam, could you see a team like a Wrexham or a Charlton, albeit if Charlton get promoted, coming in for him with the way they like to sign ex-Luton players? is actually Wrexham I have more in mind there, because they do seem to keep picking up former Luton players more so than Charlton have recently.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny you say that, because I think so far tonight you've offloaded about half of our squad to Wrexham. So they don't need to. Their scouts don't need to do any work. You're doing it for them. I agree with what Jamie said. Like, let's be honest, he is a Luton boy, but we need to make spaces for reinforcements, particularly, at least one in that area. And as a result of that, some players are going to have to move on. So for me, it's just quite cut and dry. He might be under contract, but you either, again, come to an agreement, like a mutual agreement, where you pay him half, and you let him find another club this summer, or you're proactive and saying you're on the loan market. I think there's plenty of clubs that are coming from on loan. I'm not necessarily saying they're going to be Championship, but I could see a move back to Barnsley on the cards, or, like, I don't know, if Orient don't go up, he could go somewhere like Orient if he wanted to stay local to the area. So yeah, I think there's enough interest to be able to move him on, either on a loan or a mutual decision as well. So I don't expect to have him sort of hanging around really too long.
And as much as we sort of criticise him or complain about his lack of output, he did give us two of the best moments in the Premier League season, with that incredibly late winner away at Everton in the FA Cup, and also that late equaliser at Crystal Palace. And I think if he does go, he'll certainly be remembered for those two moments in particular. And that is everyone in the squad. So it's been a pretty heavy podcast here. We've spoken about a lot of different players with lots of different opinions there. And we'd love to know your thoughts, if you're listening to this, about any of the players we've spoken about, whether that's the young players in the squad, the players that will probably look to move on, or the players we should definitely keep. So let us know in the comments if you're watching on YouTube, or if you're listening on Spotify, or get in touch with us via social media. That's at Oak Road Hatter on all of your social media platforms. And keep an eye on our website and our social media as well for written content and anything else we're producing at the moment. But from myself, from Jamie, and from Adam, I think that's everything from today's pod, and we've covered a lot of players there.